And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe Podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, the Blue Horseshoe Pod, where you can watch us each and every podcast we post. Or if you're more of a listener, don't worry, we got you covered too. The Blue Horseshoe Pod, bright blue logo wherever you do get your podcasts. All right, George, we got really two big topics we want to kind of dive into today on the pod. Later in the show, we will get to kind of breaking down Anthony Richardson expectations by comparing Peyton Manning's rookie year and discuss if Anthony Richardson puts up similar numbers to Peyton did back in 1998, would that be a success? We'll kind of break down some of those numbers there as I'm already banging the microphone, too excited, as you can tell, to kind of break down that comparison. But before we get to that, George, CBS Sports had an interesting article as we do record this here on Tuesday afternoon. And that was basically, they broke down the best dynamic duo on each team in the NFL. Now, their qualifications for what a dynamic duo means, or their qualifications for what a dynamic duo looks like for each team, was they have to play on both on the same side of the ball. So you can't have, let's just say, for argument's sake, Jonathan Taylor and Shaq Leonard. That's not a dynamic duo. You got to be either both on offense or both on defense. They can play the same position if you want, but it's not exactly a prerequisite, and they don't have to play an official game together. So they could pair a rookie with a veteran. In this case, obviously for the Colts, if you wanted to, you could say Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, even though they've never played a game together, that would still count. Now, before we kind of dive into maybe what we think will be or needs to be the best duo this year for the Colts, CBS Sports, their pick for the Colts, their best dynamic duo for this year, low prediction, is Quenton Nelson and Ryan Kelly. Would you agree with that? Would you agree going into the season right now, you think the best duo the Colts have would be their left guard and center?
I don't think going into the year coming off of last year, but I think if that does prove to be true, it would be incredibly helpful to this football team. And I think there's reason to believe both guys are going to bounce back. I know Nelson had not his normal offseason last year just because of all the back things and, everything he dealt with the year before. So I think he's back to entirely full health now. You would hope that that's going to lift him a little bit, and you hope that the play on the other side of him at left tackle will maybe improve enough that it'll help him to return more to what we've seen from him throughout his career. And Ryan Kelly, that guy, between injuries and off the field situations, went through probably more than anyone on this team in the last 2 years. And so I think a lot of that is in a better place right now. Physically, he's in a good place. They've obviously, he and his wife have twins on the way, which is outstanding news. And so I think you might see him be able to make that bounce back as well. I think it's important for the team that it happens. I don't think I would going in. I don't know who I would say the best duo is. That's interested to see what your thoughts are.
I got one going. So I think we can handle this in two, discussions. We can do right now best going in, and maybe the duo the Colts need to be the best, when the season is over. But I think going in, I think you would like this one a lot. Doesn't it have to be just DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on the inside?
Yeah, after you say that, like all of a sudden I'm like, I really was not thinking about the obvious answer here. Those two, DeForest gets all the national attention, and rightfully so, because he's a beast. I think he's led the team in sacks 2 of the 3 years he was here, and he's a leading guy coming back this year. And then Grover, I just think is underrated, except by this pod. Because
that's right.
He's just been so productive. He's such a huge part of the run defense, obviously, but he'll surprise you with his pass rush. He's not a consistent pass rusher, though he says this year he's going to stay on the field all 3 downs. But he makes plays in that area of the game. And I think when teams don't really respect that, they pay. The teams that aren't thinking about him in that area end up picking up their quarterback at least once off the field as a result of it. So, yeah, I think those two, if I'm looking at 2 players on the team who I have the most confidence in that the things are going to be fine, they're right there at the top of the list.
I think it underscores Grover Stewart's underratedness because, again, you're right. This is, and again, CBS Sports is doing this going into this year. So it's not really a projection, but it's kind of look at the roster. Quenton Nelson and Ryan Kelly having arguably their worst years of their career last year. There's no reason right now. You could argue they're the most important. And that, again, that's a different conversation of who the Colts need to be their best duo. But going into the year, it's the interior. And I get it. Interior is not sexy. And like you said, DeForest Buckner gets a lot of the headlines, and Grover Stewart just kind of weirdly outside of Colts Nation does his business, great business, basically in the dark. No one is noticing. That's a guy that absolutely, you pair those two together on the interior. That is, I think, by far, especially with the injuries to Shaq Leonard, as well in the secondary being a massive question. Like, there's a lot of question marks on this team. I think for the Colts, at least, easily going in the duo under these rules that you would say is the best going into this year definitely would be Buckner and Stewart without a doubt. When it comes to importance, though, George, like who the Colts need at the end of the year to be the best dynamic duo, I would argue, at least on offense, I would say Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce. Because if they are having, for Pierce, he takes a step in year number 2, and Pittman kind of really builds consistency and really is a good safety blanket for Anthony Richardson, that's just going to make his development so much better and really make him that much more, better of a quarterback, because not only now do you have 2 reliable targets, especially with Pierce's skill set of being the deep threat guy. And we know that's Richardson's, strength right now is throwing the deep ball in one of the areas he is already, has more progress in compared to other areas of the passing game. If he's able to establish a deep ball with Pierce and also get on a really good, build a lot of chemistry, I should say, with Pittman, especially that you would think prototype wise would be your kind of third down go-to, 3rd and 7, need those tough yards. Pittman's the guy you look for. If they are both able to really help Richardson's adjustment and really even make some tough catches and bail him out a few, I think that, especially on offense, is probably the most important duo the Colts need to have. So if you have 2 receivers playing at a high level, that's going to make Richardson's job just so much more easier.
Yeah, if your pick comes together with CBS's pick, that would be the greatest thing for Anthony Richardson possible. Nelson and Kelly step up and play, at the top of their levels, and Pittman and Pierce both do. He's got protection and he's got playmakers on the outside. That would, I think, really accelerate Anthony Richardson's development. I think that would be huge for them. I'll go to the other side of the ball, and we don't even know the identity of these two yet. But I think it's incredibly important that starting outside cornerbacks end up having a good year. And right now, just for this argument's sake, I'll go with Juju Brents and Dallas Flowers. I think even the youth at quarterback, to me, the corner situation is a bigger question mark, because the Colts know if it comes to it, they've got Gardner Minshew. He's a veteran. He's made starts in this league before. He can go out there and he can at least operate the offense and do it at an NFL caliber level. So if they're in a situation where they feel like Anthony Richardson's injured or he's not ready to do, what needs to be done in that moment, they've got a backup plan. There's a plan B there. It may not be the best plan B, but there's an NFL caliber player behind him. At corner, I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, in this instance, we're talking about Kenny Moore being on the inside, where he primarily plays. After him, you've got rookies and guys who've not played much in this league. I mean, all across the board. If Dallas Flowers isn't that number 2 guy, it's probably going to be Darius Rush, who's also a rookie, or Darrell Baker, who's not a rookie by designation, but a rookie by experience, or Tony Brown, who's a veteran, but hasn't really played a lot on the outside, is more suited to be Kenny Moore's backup, or Jalen Jones, who's, guess what, a rookie. So I just look at that spot and I think you don't have the safety net there. There isn't really that plan B. If one of these guys or more is injured, and corners get injured all the time. I mean, that's Chuck Pagano used to always say they're like Ferraris, they're high performance, but they're also high maintenance. You got to do a lot of work on them, keep them running. And I think that's just nature of that position. There's so many ways that a corner can get tied up or can get, injured, because most of them aren't. Now, they do have bigger guys, so we'll see how that goes. Most of them aren't bigger players. Maybe that's Gus Bradley's whole idea. He wants his corners to do the injury and not to be receiving the injuries. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think that position, to me, arguably the thinnest on the depth chart on the roster. And if you have, for instance, Brents and Flowers step up over there and play at even average NFL starter levels, I think that would be huge for not just this defense, but this entire team.
Especially with their age too, where like you said, like this is you can obviously can carry through, and that, you know, you can rely on them for the next, let's say 5 years or so. It's not one of those situations where they're on a 1-year deal or on the tail end of their careers. Even if they play well, how much more they have left. Again, this is a team that's in a long build. So you're right in the sense that if the Colts can feel good by the end of the 2023 season, that they have a really solid duo on the outside, that's a big win for this team. Defensively, though, honestly, I would say more important than corner, I would go defensive end in terms of a duo that has to play well with Kwity Paye, and we'll put Dio Dengbo because Samson Ebukam is, I would say maybe ideally if he's your third edge rusher, you feel better about that because Dio and Kwity, not only because they're drafted, but also their age as well. You feel like that should be the tandem, the 1-2 punch that is here for the long haul. You hope he's here for the long haul, especially for Kwity Paye, where this is going to year 3. If he could really take a big jump here and develop consistency, that's one where if you're the Colts, you feel really good. It's been a problem for a while, right? They've not really got sustained edge pressure, and have had, you know, a ton of production and a ton of consistent production now, really ever since Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney left. If you can kind of get them at least back on the right track where you feel like, okay, we got 2 young defensive ends that are growing here and definitely, you know, can continue to develop and be a force going forward at the end of 2023. I would say you're feeling really good if you're Gus Bradley and really good about this Colts defense, that you can get a really good duo on the edge to obviously, as we know, get pressure to the quarterback, which maybe outside of quarterback is the second most important aspect of the game when it comes to trying to winning games.
And that's why these two were drafted. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to forget how excited Jim Irsay was that day that they were drafted and talking about these bookend pass rushers, and they're going to get back into that situation. So year 3, it's time for them to start playing that way. It's time for them to take a hold of those roles and go out and, make it happen. I do think it's probably going to be by committee again this year, like it was last year. And that worked out for them. They had 44 sacks. They were really close to a franchise record. I think you're going to see similar situation to that with Ebukam, as you mentioned. I think Tyquan Lewis is going to work into that mix. They brought in Jannard Avery, who may come in to play with all this. But I think it's going to be by committee. I think it would be much better for them if it's not, if Paye and Dengbo are able to step up and separate themselves, and then you have the committee behind them filling in. I think that's the better way for this to go. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I guess one more duo I would throw out there that I think could be of interest, too, because I'm going to go on one really quickly. I mean, obviously, Zaire Franklin and Shaq Leonard, if Shaq is healthy, has a chance to be right there with Grover and Buckner, if they are both healthy and playing at a high level. But I think the intriguing one, and it fits these rules, but it's probably not come right to mind, is Kenny Moore and Julian Blackman. They'll be the nickel and the strong safety. They talked a lot this offseason about, Julian last year after Kenny got hurt had to come in and play nickel. Mm-hmm. So he saw the field from a different angle, and something closer to where he's going to be this year is strong safety. He's going to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. I think there's a synergy between those two that maybe hasn't always been there because of the way things went last year. It might be like the ultimate silver lining of last season is that Blackman ended up getting a different perspective and being comfortable moving into that strong safety spot, which also allows them to keep Rodney Thomas on the field as the free safety, which the way he played last year is important. But I think you just have almost a mentorship thing going on there, where Kenny Moore's kind of taken Julian Blackman under his wing. Blackman's another guy who's been injured, has had flashes. You want to see him take that next step up. And it just feels like with the position change and with sort of the synergy between him and Kenny right now, that's something that if they both play well, it could really help out not just the defense in general, but maybe both of them to get new contracts here.
And especially, too, with those two almost by default, especially playing-wise, being the 2 most experienced guys in the secondary, right? If they're healthy and playing well, that should be able to rub off on so many other guys, especially on the outside, they're inexperienced. And like I said, if you're able to keep them both around, which would be huge, it's like, again, you help the secondary continue to get better because you still have that veteran presence there. Whereas if one or both get hurt and not on the field or leave after the season, you're kind of looking around and going, boy, this is really short on experience. A lot of those guys, I would assume, will rotate in, like you mentioned, with injuries and the inexperience. I'm guessing we'll see more than 2 corners on the outside this year, George. So it will be almost a trial by fire, or maybe baptism by fire is the better word to use there, or a better phrase to use there. But yeah, to have some guys that have kind of been through it and see it, I think is huge, not just for this season, but obviously going forward as well. I like that one a lot. To wrap up here, because I was just kind of thinking about this when we were kind of going back and forth, which duo is more important for the Colts' success in 2023? Is it the duo of Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor? Or is it the duo of Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman Jr. in terms of putting production on the field? Is it the run-pass game you think is going to be more important, or is it going to be the run game, if you will, with JT and Richardson? You think that'll be the bigger duo here for this team?
It's a really good question, in part because I think from the way that Steichen seems to want to draw up this offense with the deep shots, and obviously that's where Richardson is his strongest right now, you'd lean towards Pittman because you want to make sure that high productivity is out there. And I think Pittman's going to be the move the chains guy. He's going to be that 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6 type of guy, in addition to having big plays here and there. So I think that would be huge. But on the other side, you could make the argument that it's the Richardson Taylor duo that could open up more for the passing game. The more success they're able to have, the more defenses have to focus on them. You could open up more of the passing game than just one receiver. So I think I will go that way, simply because I think with Pittman, he definitely will help Pierce the more production he has, but I'm not sure that does much for the run game. The deep ball will, because it'll pull some people out of the box. But I think the run game, if it's clicking, if they're both at the highest level that you can, we've seen what Jonathan Taylor can do. And if Richardson hits his ceiling in the run game, I just think it opens up so much more for the offense in general. I mean, defenses are going to be really put in a lot of conflict trying to decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to creep up knowing that deep ball is probably Richardson's strength right now? Or do you want to hope that, you can stop them without loading the box? I think that to me is the most dangerous thing this offense can do this year, is get those two running at a level where defenses are just really perplexed about what they're going to do next.
I would say Taylor for 2 reasons. One is, like you said, if you are able to get the run game going, now that really sets up the pass game where you are loading the box with 7, 8 guys consistently. That's just going to make Anthony Richardson's life then as a passer a lot easier. So obviously, again, I think, like you said, I think they will try to run the ball to set up the pass is kind of maybe the feel, especially early on for Richardson, that I kind of get from this offense. But also, too, you go back to last year with Shane Steichen in Philly. Look, not that the Colts have anywhere near the talent on the roster that the Eagles do, but you look at how the Eagles offense ran. Not only did they run the ball to set up the pass, but also you see Jalen Hurts. He had A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and I'm blanking on that. Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert. The 3-headed monster in terms of receiving options. And they spread the ball out a ton on top of other options they had in the passing game with their running backs, with Quez. Like, they had 4 or 5 legitimate receivers that, contributed, plus tight ends, plus Miles Sanders and co out of the backfield as well. So it wasn't like the Eagles offense was just, okay, we're going to, when we throw the ball, it's one guy, right? We're focusing on one guy. They spread the ball out a ton. And so with that, if you were able to get Jonathan Taylor going, it's not like then when the pass game's opening up, it's going to be the Michael Pittman show where he's going to get 100 balls and be the main guy in offense. You have Pittman, you have Pierce, you have Jelani Woods, you have hopefully Drew Ogletree, you have Josh Downs, you have Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield as well. Like, not in terms of talent, but in terms of options, the Colts and Eagles are kind of the same, where it's not going to be a one-headed monster in terms of the passing game, where it's going to be, anytime Richardson's passing, I'm looking Pittman's way every time first. You'll have different reads for different players, and you all think we'll have an abundance of options where I think you'll see a spreading out of the ball where it won't be too heavy towards one player, which again would kind of go back to, you don't need to have an elite established connection with Pittman Jr. just because you're going to be getting the ball to so many different players that, again, is also helped predicated on running the ball and opening everything up. So that's why I'm with you. I would go Jonathan Taylor just because it does feel like a run first offense. And if you run the ball, obviously we know you're able to open up the pass game. And once you're able to do that, he should kind of be like a point guard, spread it out like Jalen Hurts did, and have, again, not talent-wise, but option-wise, similar options to the way Jalen Hurts ran the offense last year. We spread it out, keep defenses on their toes, and it also makes Richardson a better quarterback if he's reading the defense and going where the ball, where the receiver's open and the defense tells him to go, compared to just locking in on one guy and saying 3rd and 7, no matter what they're doing, I'm throwing the ball to MPJ.
I think that was part of the problem when Wentz was here, is that they got a little too locked in on Pittman, and they weren't able to make big plays when defenses took him away. And so you don't want to get into that situation again. Last year too, at times when Ryan was on the field, I think they were too locked into Pittman last year, and they weren't able to really open up the rest of that offense. So yeah, you're going to need to find ways to do that. I think with Matt Ryan, a lot of that was his, inability to really push the ball far enough downfield consistently. So it was Pittman he was going to, because that's who he trusted more underneath. Pittman and the tight ends. I mean, that was kind of most of the passing game. I think you need to open that up, get that field spread a little bit. And yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor helps you do that.
Absolutely. So dynamic duos will be definitely something to watch so far this season. CBS Sports says Ryan Kelly and Quenton Nelson are the best duo for the Colts heading to 2023. Could not disagree with that one more. Do you think it's Buckner and Grover? And you heard just kind of George and I talking about a few different duos and offense and defense that really do need to step up this season for this team, and Richardson especially, to have some success this season. Speaking of Richardson, George, I think it's in our contract. We cannot go one pod without talking about Anthony Richardson in some capacity. You are shaking your head in agreement there. So we definitely need to talk about AR5. Let's do it, George, in this context then. Obviously, there's a lot of unknown with how he'll play, when he'll play in the regular season. So let me ask this on the surface. If Anthony Richardson mirrors what Peyton Manning did in his rookie year in 1998, because we're not going to do Andrew Luck. That's just, I think, too high of a bar and almost too unfair. Where you're putting the kid up to fail right away. But if you go back to what Peyton Manning did in his rookie year in 1998, and Richardson basically mirrors what he did, would that be a successful season? So let's kind of go number by number here, George. Kind of yes or no, would you say that that's a success based on the stat I give you? Let's start this. Peyton Manning, his rookie year, started 16 games. Obviously, there's one extra. So we'll give maybe a 1-game grace period here for Anthony Richardson. If he starts 16 games, is that a success in 2023?
Yeah, absolutely.
100% agree. Don't have to waste much time there. Obvious. How about this one? Peyton Manning, his rookie year. Colts went 3-13. Again, obviously an extra game, but let's just say the Colts get 3 wins in 2023. Now, would you take that? But would you, I guess maybe the easier question would be for this specific answer or this specific question, would that be a failure in your mind if they are sitting there at 3-14?
No, as we said, again and again, the record doesn't matter this year. And it might get you Marvin Harrison. So there might be some benefits to that.
Right. I'm with you there. If they go 3-14, 3 wins, that's to me a win in a sense, just because, like you said, now you are in the sweepstakes to get the best receiver in the draft and really get a huge weapon for Richardson's development. Like we've said a ton of times, but just to reiterate, the record in 2023 is irrelevant. Obviously, we want them to win every game. They're not going to come close to that. But 3-14 next year, no reason to go crazy, to cancel Richardson, to cut him. No reason to get crazy whatsoever. Record will have nothing to do with how he will be judged in 2023. All right, Peyton Manning led the league in 1998 in pass attempts. He had 575 pass attempts, which averages out to basically 36 pass attempts per game. Now, in the modern day NFL, because that's, again, with Peyton playing, over 20 years ago, 36 attempts or 575 attempts, I should say, for a season is the 8th most last year for quarterbacks last year. So if Richardson is top 10 in passing attempts, would you take that as a win, or would you say, that's not really the balance I want?
Yeah, it's not really the balance I think they need. I don't think you want to put that on the shoulders of a rookie quarterback. I think that number had a lot to do with the number we're going to see later here.
Yes. I like the tease. Honestly, I actually would take that. I would say that's a win just because when you see Richardson's play, we just talked about the importance of Jonathan Taylor, so I'm not trying to contradict myself here, and that duo working well. But what I will say is, like, Richardson had a lot of this discussion about him as being kind of a Cam Newton type where he runs a lot. Then you watch him at Florida, he really does look to pass more than he does look to run. So when you're looking at that number, about, let's say, 36 pass attempts per game, I'll take that as where he is still looking to pass more than he's running. I think to me that's a good thing. Even if he's not having success throwing the ball, even if it leads to a number we're going to get to here in a little bit that Peyton Manning's infamous for, if he is still sitting back there and even when the play breaks down, scrambling and still looking to throw the ball more than he's looking to run, to me, that's still a win. So I actually will take 36 pass attempts per game. It is a lot. And again, you're talking about a top 10 in terms of attempts, even just in last year's game. So I don't think he's going to lead the league like Peyton did in 1998. We're still talking about a top 10 in the NFL and all the NFL in terms of attempts last year. I would still take that as a win just because that I would interpret that number, George, meaning he is still looking to pass more than he's looking to run. And I think that's not only what his game is, and that's kind of a good mark of someone who's comfortable and able to read the defense and not kind of putting the rookie blinders on, but also too someone who's hopefully having his game grow. And that's the more sustainable way rather than being a battering ram 10, 15 times a game, which we've seen, unfortunately, other quarterbacks do that, leads to a shorter shelf life in the game. That's for sure.
No doubt about that. You don't want to see that end up in. We dealt with that here before.
Yes. Oh, yes. Unfortunately, it does hit too close to home. How about passing yards? Peyton Manning, his rookie year, 3,739 passing yards. That averages to about 233 yards per game. Again, in today's NFL, that would be the 16th most in the 2022 season. Would you take that as a win? Basically 230 passing yards per game on average over the course of the season. Would you say, like, was that a number, if that's what we say at the end of the 2023 season for Richardson, you would say, yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, because that's where I want him to be in the pass attempts range too. I want him to be in that middle. If he has about 14, 15, 16 in terms of attempts and 14, 15, 16 in terms of yardage, then that's going to tell me he's been efficient and they're using him enough. He's not shying away from throwing the ball. And he's also making plays when he does, because, you know, if the attempts are high and the yards are low, that's not going to be really good, obviously. I'd like to see both those numbers right there in the middle of the league.
I know it's kind of like you said, it's like top 10 in attempts, and when you're middle of the tier and yards, not great. I still will take that just because I think, like, I have no problem with him passing a lot, but I'm also realistic in the sense that he's not going to be completing a ton of passes either. Like, there is inconsistency. Some games he might go 25 or 36. Other games he might go 17 or 36. Like, that's something I'm absolutely bracing for. So I do think that, like, I would be happy if he is, you know, throwing the ball a ton, but also I'm also cognizant of the fact that it could be some, you know, ugly games there that really do balance it out, where I don't think it's going to be, oh, he throws a lot and also means it's going to be a lot of yards. He's not going to be Jameis Winston. We've referenced this a few times. Jameis Winston's 2019 season, where he led the league in passing yards. I forget if I don't think he led the league in passing touchdowns, but he was close with 33 and led the league in interceptions with 30. Like, but it correlated to where he threw the ball a lot of touchdowns, a lot of picks, a lot of yards. I don't think with Richardson, you're going to see a correlation between pass attempts and passing yards, where if he throws more, have more yards. It will be kind of, again, a seesaw up and down ride. So even though I do think that he hopefully will have a ton of attempts, I'm not expecting a ton of yards, at least in his rookie season. That is for sure. 26 touchdowns is what Peyton Manning threw in his rookie year. That would be 7th most in the NFL this year. Obviously, I'm going to assume, George, you would take that.
Oh, absolutely. That number is on the high end of what I expect.
Then if I put the number at 20 and a half, over under, would you take the over or the under on passing, just passing touchdowns? We'll go for Anthony Richardson here in 2023.
I think it's going to be the under. I think slightly over would be where you want to be. I mean, he had 17 last year at Florida. So Obviously, a couple of less games. I'm thinking somewhere in that 21 range is where I'm expecting him to come in this year. So, anything 21 or above, I'll say was a good number.
So if it's 21, you would say a success.
Yeah, for me.
20 and a half, I would take the over too. Obviously, we take the 26 touchdowns. Now, again, you're talking about top 10 in terms of passing touchdowns, but I would take the over on 20 and a half. And again, I think that's a win too. Kind of, I'm going to look at, I don't know how you feel about this, George. I'm going to look at touchdown passes a lot like I look at the record. I'm not going to be going crazy if it's a low touchdown number, just because, again, I am embracing for a lot of ups and downs. And I do expect once I get to the red zone and the field shrinks, that's going to be, I think, an area that Richardson is going to have a lot to learn. And so I do expect him to be running a lot. I expect Jonathan Taylor to be running a lot. So I don't think they'll be throwing a ton inside the 20s, especially early. So I do expect that touchdown number to be low, but I'm not going to go, like, if he has 15 touchdown passes in 2023, I'm not going to be freaking out. I don't know how you feel about that, but I kind of look, to me, the number of wins and the number of touchdown passes in 2023 is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, I think more total touchdowns is going to be the thing with him. Is he getting in with his legs? Then does it really matter which way? And really just efficiency of the offense in general. Because like you're saying, if you're getting down inside the 5 and Jonathan Taylor's finishing off drives, then your touchdown pass total is not really all that relevant here. So, yeah, I think it's just efficiency of the offense. Is he getting into the red zone, getting them opportunities to score? That's what I'd be looking at.
I would agree. And that's why, like I said, it's one of those where I'm not going to go crazy about a touchdown number, just because, again, it's all about development and consistency. And if that means that the touchdown passes are low to begin with and you pick up steam at the end, I don't think then if the number is 16, we should be freaking out that much. Now, here's a number that could get fans a little, their panties bunching a wad here. The number that always goes back to Peyton Manning's rookie year, 28 interceptions. He came close to joining Jameis Winston, or really becoming the first member, I should say, of the 30-30 club, throwing 26 touchdowns and 28 interceptions. Still the rookie record for reference last year. 15 interceptions was the league leader by Dak Prescott there. So almost half as many as Peyton threw in that rookie year in 2018. So obviously, or 1998, 2018, holy cow, 1998, 20 years too short there. What is a number, George, you look at? Because obviously 28 people are going to be freaking out, and that's a number that's way too high. Is there a number, like if it's 15, that was the league leader last year. A few quarterbacks had that. If he throws 15 picks, what is your panic meter, or are you freaking out that much about that number specifically? I think
it's another number that I don't know that you can focus on the number itself, because I think even in Manning's case, a lot of that came from, one, how much he had to throw. And a lot of the reason he had to throw as often as he did is they were behind all the time. It was a 3-13 season. They were constantly behind. A lot of those picks are coming in situations where he's just trying to make something happen. So you don't love them. Your 28's never good. It's not like, oh, well, it's okay. This is why that was fine. But I think that's going to be, if he throws 15, 16, 17 picks, but they're fourth quarter picks when they're down 2 touchdowns, I'm not going to feel the same way about it as I am if it's 15, 16, 17 picks and their first half picks that are taking points off the board in close games. I mean, I think it's really more about when they happen and the decisions that he's making. There are times that's always my argument on the Carson Wentz season, to be honest. People say, well, he only threw 7 interceptions, which is true. But you look where those 7 interceptions came, most of them are killers. I feel like 6 of them were against the Titans, it feels like. But it's just, there were times where I think he should have made a more risky throw and he didn't. And I think that's, to me, it's not just a number. You can look at the number and you're going to have feelings on it, but that's just box score scouting and that's not going to get you anywhere. To me, it's really more about the decision-making he has. And I would rather see my quarterback in certain situations be risky. And if it gets intercepted, so be it. Not Matt Ryan last year, but also not Carson Wentz the year before.
Like, I guess out of the 3, let's say pass attempts, touchdowns, and interceptions, the one I'm looking at the most is going to be pass attempts, just because it's kind of what we talked about before, George, when you were at minicamp and for the first time you saw Richardson in back-to-back days and you're able to see how he responds to adversity. Like if he throws 15 picks, I'm not freaking out. But what I want to see is if Shane Steichen still kind of goes back to the well, and again, not a Jameis Winston situation where Bruce Arians had him kept throwing the ball no matter what, and he got to the point where he's throwing 30 picks. But I want to see a situation where he's not afraid, both Steichen to call pass plays and Richardson to let it rip, of still going after it after you throw a pick. So like the number of interceptions to me is not worrisome. What I'm more looking at is, and I'm almost kind of excited to see in a year that, again, record doesn't mean anything. If the pick number is high, how does he respond? Either after a game where he throws 3 interceptions, or even after a drive when he throws a pick that he got fooled or should have made a better read on. Is he ready to come right back out and be aggressive and still be able to make that same read or same throw again? That's what I'm more watching. So like the interception number is not irrelevant, because again, if he's throwing 28 picks, that is concerning. And I think you can see some situations that, like I said, his decision-making would be very shaky. But I'm more looking at when it comes to that interception number, is he still throwing the ball after? Is he going to get gun shy? Or will he still come back and say, you know, that's my mistake, kind of like Andrew Luck. I'm going to go out there and make up for it, and I'm going to make sure this next drive ends in points. That's one of the areas that separated Luck so much, is because when he did make a pick, and he was also he was a little carefree, you know, he was a little free with the ball, maybe I should say, where he did, you know, his interception number was a little high. But that was a guy that felt like he made up for it a lot more times than he did. And after a big turnover, that's what I'm watching here for Richardson for sure. So that's why you look at the interception number. Obviously, you don't want 28, but if he's near the league lead, 14, 15, 16, I'm not freaking out. If he responds well after them, I'll take that as a good sign for sure.
I think the common denominator for both of us, there's no fear. That's what we want to see. No fear.
Exactly right. Exactly. And if that means 20 interceptions, so be it. Again, Peyton Manning bounced back after 28. So that number, like I said, it's more about how you respond to the interception than the number itself, at least in year number 1 for sure. 2 more quickly here, George. This should be an easy one as well. Peyton Manning, is passer rating in his rookie year, 71.2. Now, again, different game, but if that comparing that to last year's numbers, that'll be 55th among all quarterbacks in the NFL last year. Not great. If he is between 25 to 30, let's say, and this is also quarterbacks, this is passer ratings, any quarterback that plays. It's not just the starting 32. If you play 3, 4, 5 games, you're in there. But if he is somewhere in the 25 to 30 range, would you take that next year in terms of passer rating?
Yeah, because again, we know this is a process. It's going to take some time. Obviously, not the Manning number if that's too low. Where he ranked, I don't know where it's going to be. You know, where things come out. But I think it's going to come with the territory. So we're talking about probably not going to be the most efficient quarterback, at least early in the season. So efficiency plays a big role into that. But if by the end of the year, if he's in that 25 to 30 range, I would call that a success.
I would love for him to be, top 20, obviously would be ideal. But if he's, I'll say 20 to 25, I would take that. I would feel pretty good. 25 to 30 is a little, at least for me, concerning. But again, like I said, it's one of those things where a lot of numbers don't matter, but definitely in that 20 to 25 range, I feel pretty good compared to kind of being the later half and 25 to 30. See some names in that range. It's a little spooky, but definitely I would love 20 to 25, but definitely not 55th. That's one of those numbers, kind of like the 20 interceptions. Definitely not 55th in 2023, that's for sure. And finally, despite the 28 interceptions and the 26 touchdowns, Peyton Manning finished second in Rookie of the Year voting in 1998. Randy Moss was the winner there. If he finishes second, yeah, exactly right. Talk about a bust, not. If he finishes second in Rookie of the Year voting, a success for you, George?
Yeah, if he's second to my pick, Jackson Smith and Jigba, then that's a really good season and a nice little mirroring of what happened apparently in 1998. With all the quarterbacks and the situation it is, I don't expect him to be the Rookie of the Year. I think Bryce Young's got a really good chance. I think CJ Stroud's going to be in the mix. I pick Smith and Jigba because I think he's got a chance to come right into Seattle and do well. I think Bijan Robinson's going to end up in this conversation. If he finishes second in that group, say he had a pretty good year, and I'd be pretty impressed with it.
What about second among quarterbacks? Because you're right, there are a lot of good rookies in good situations. If he is second in quarterbacks, maybe that's 4th or 5th in the voting. Would you consider that a success?
Yeah, his third quarterback taken. So if he beats one of the 2 guys ahead of him, I think that you're going to feel good about that. from the standpoint of, what you did in the draft. And again, I think for him, so much of this, I hate to say it, because when I talk about like results don't matter, I hate those words even coming out of my mouth. But so much of this is more about feel and development. And, it's really more important that we see him growing. You see him making the right decisions. You see the guys around him growing. I think I'm more worried about that than I am any number, where he ranks or, what he produces. I think it's just more important that you're seeing that growth from him from week to week.
I think Bryce Young by far will be the best rookie quarterback. I know, hot take there, and I think he's in a really good situation. But I think he should finish in second in terms of quarterbacks. Like CJ Stroud is the more polished and more NFL ready quarterback. But you look at Houston, George, like I got questions about what they're doing. Offense coordinator, first time OC calling plays, and Bobby Slowick. I should say, I actually don't know the pronunciation. So I think hopefully one of the two pronunciations, hopefully I got right. But he's coming over from the 49ers with D'Amico Ryans. I have no idea who's throwing the ball to. Like that receiving core, especially with Brandon Cooks traded this offseason, is a bunch of no names. So, and the offensive line has questions too. Richardson, despite his learning curve being steeper and more progress needs to be made in order to be NFL ready compared to Stroud, I think he's in a better situation. I do trust Shane Steichen to develop him better. I like Shane Steichen's offense. You look at least on paper, the talent the Colts have on offense. They have more weapons and more established talent than Houston does. Even though, again, CJ Stroud is more pro-ready, Richardson at the end of the year should have a better year than Stroud. So, again, it is, yes, not a numbers-based season for Richardson in terms of how we'll grade him and how we'll judge how he does in his rookie year. But definitely, if he is the second quarterback, I think that should be the expectation. He should have a better year than CJ Stroud. I think hopefully, if that's the case at the end of the season, you'll be feeling pretty good about going into year 2 and beyond. All right, so kind of a quickie here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod. That will do it for this edition. Really do appreciate you tuning in. If this is your first time, or you have friends that are Colts fans that want to tune in, bring them into our community, bring them into the family here, the Blue Horseshoe family. Easiest way to do so is by pushing them to our YouTube page, Blue Horseshoe Pod, or checking us out wherever you get your podcasts, the Blue Horseshoe Pod, in the nice, bright blue logo. That is our fresh feed, our new feed, where every single show will be dropped as we go on. We will be back next Tuesday, still some more, off-season summer school, if you will, preview, getting ready for training camp. We'll have a little bit of a break. We'll tell you about that later on in kind of the middle of July, right before training camp starts, but we will be back next Tuesday. So have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you next Tuesday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.